One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt.
Everyone to Out in Front with Annette. My name is Annette Magnus, and I am the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. Hope you enjoyed our in memoriam of the important bills that died on the last deadline. We'll have another in memoriam, I'm sure, for next week since we have another bill deadline tomorrow. I am so excited for this panel tonight. We are going to have a great conversation, so make sure you bring your questions. We have all the NVLeg questions that you need. Like I said, my name is Annette Magnus. I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. I'm here at the legislature in the legislative building live. We had a long day of floor sessions today. A lot of our priority bills got passed out today, including Assembly Bill 112, which I was super excited about. That's our wildlife crossings bill. We saw some of our other priorities getting moved. So lots going on in the building today. We have Senator Melanie Scheibel joining us tonight. She's going to talk about one of her in memoriam bills that we just talked about and a few other things. We have our dear friend, Assemblyman Huey Nguyen. He is joining us tonight because he couldn't be here last week. He was in committee, so we get to have him tonight, and we're honored. And then we also have Dennis Biles. He is from Oakland. He's going to be talking about all things Oakland A's since he has experienced the Oakland A's firsthand. And then we have Paul Bozier, who is with KUNR and KPNR, and one of the dear friends of BBP, has me on the show all the time, so his show all the time. So I thought I would return the favor this week. So can't wait to have this conversation with you again. If you have questions, put them in the chat. We're going to be talking about the deadline tomorrow, all the different bills we're working on, lots going on. All right, Senator Scheibel, I'm just going to move the computer. You're here with me. Say hello to everybody. Introduce yourself again.
Everybody. I'm Melanie Scheibel. I'm the state senator for District 9, which is in the southwest part of Las Vegas. I'm so excited to chat with you. This is, I don't know, the third or fourth time
Many times.
Been on Out Front with Annette, and I'm so grateful to work with Battleborn Progress here in the building and hope that we can help all of you understand what's going on and how you can get involved.
Okay, so you have some of my favorite bills this session. We've been working together quite a bit. Talk to me about SB 153 and SB 163. Those are our transgender affirming care bills that are very near and dear to my heart. I know Cy and Brooke and Andre and so many in our community have been working on those with us. Talk to us about why those bills are important, what they do, and where they're at.
So SB 153 and 163 might be the most important bills that I've ever worked on, frankly. And so they are both bills that were brought to me by members of the transgender community who saw a need to fix something legislatively that was affecting their lives. And so they're two very different policies. SB 153 requires the Department of Corrections to implement a policy around transgender, gender nonconforming, and gender non-binary folks in their custody. So essentially it says that the Department of Corrections can't continue to confuse equity with equality, right? And say that we treat everybody equally by treating them all the same. When we know that people who are gender nonconforming face special challenges, dangers, security risks when they are in a setting of being incarcerated. So SB 153 calls on the Department of Corrections in consultation with advocacy groups, with transgender non-binary people, with people who are in custody, to come up with a policy that outlines what are they supposed to be doing to ensure that everybody in their custody is remaining safe and being treated with dignity and respect. The other bill that we were talking about is SB 163, another one that I absolutely love. I introduced this bill last session and it didn't make it, so I brought it back, and it prohibits insurance companies from discriminating against people based on their gender identity or expression. So basically, it requires any insurance company that covers a particular procedure, medication, treatment to provide that to everybody, regardless of their gender, and prohibits them from denying it to a transgender person when they provide it to a cisgender person.
Okay, so you've got those important bills. You also have another lovely important bill that I know is near and dear to Brian's heart and mine. That is your in-jail voting bill, SB 162, not to be confused with SB 163. No. So talk to us about that bill and why that bill is so important and where that bill is.
So SB 162 is currently in the Senate Finance Committee, which means that it passed the Policy Committee, which is the Legislative Operations and Elections Committee. And now it's in Finance, where the committee is considering whether or not it will have a fiscal impact. Great news, it will not. Because I've been working with the sheriffs and chiefs and the Nevada Association of Counties to try to find out what people are currently doing. And it sounds like most counties are currently trying to provide a way for people to be able to vote while they are in jail. And what SB 162 does is it requires every single county to have a policy and submit that policy to the Secretary of State. And so that allows somebody who is in jail and eligible to vote. So just to clarify, we're not talking about prison where people are serving felony sentences. We're talking about jail where people are generally awaiting trial. So they still have the presumption of innocence. They've not been convicted of any crime. They're waiting for their trial date, but they're in custody while they're waiting. And so for those folks, they still have the right to vote, and SB 162 would provide, that there is a written policy for whatever facility they're in about how they're supposed to be able to vote, whether it's by mail, whether it's utilizing the electronic ease system, so that if they are denied their right to vote, which hopefully never happens, they have some recourse. And instead of just saying, I should be able to vote, but I wasn't able to, you can say, well, here's where the policy broke down. You were supposed to bring an ease machine, or you were supposed to bring me my mail ballot, or you were supposed to have a representative from the Department of Elections here to distribute ballots. Whatever works for that particular facility has to be put in writing and provided and kept up to date with the Secretary of State.
Awesome. Okay, so there's another bill that I know you and I care deeply about, SB 352, which was your 12-month birth control bill. As somebody who not only uses, birth control for reproductive purposes, but for medical condition that I have, it's really hard sometimes for me to actually get access to my birth control because I have to go through all these hoops with my insurance company and with the pharmacy, because they'll only give 3 months at a time currently. And then when I have to get the prescription renewed, it's ahead of time. And so it's another hassle to get it renewed. All that being said, this would change that. But that's one of the bills that was in memoriam that died. So talk to me about that bill and why that bill is so important.
So SB 352 builds on work that we've been doing for many sessions here at the legislature. In 2017, we passed a bill that allowed pharmacists to, I might have the dates mixed up, but in 2017, we passed a bill requiring insurance companies to give clients or patients 12 months of birth control at a time. But they still weren't always able to access it because they couldn't get the appointments. So then in 2019, we came back and we allowed pharmacists the ability to prescribe.
That was 2021.
Okay.
So it was during the pandemic, because I remember I testified from it at home after my COVID shot. So go
ahead. Right. So then in 2019, we came in and said that a pharmacy actually has to dispense the 12-month prescription if it is prescribed. And then in 2021, we came in and gave pharmacists the ability to prescribe birth control. All of this in an effort to help people walk into the pharmacy and walk back out with a 12-month supply. Still isn't working. Why? Because there is a little thing called the pharmacy benefit manager. They're kind of like this intermediary between the pharmacy and the insurance company. And so we had thought to require this of the insurance companies and the pharmacies, but not the pharmacy benefit managers. So the pharmacy benefit managers were denying 12-month prescriptions. And so for that reason, people were still unable to get them. So SB 352 hopefully would finally catch everybody in that very complex stream of healthcare bureaucracy and say every single person along the chain has to abide by the 12-month policy and distribute 12 months of birth control at a time when ordered by a prescriber. And unfortunately, the bill did not make it through the Assembly Policy Committee. And so, the session's not over yet. I'm still looking at some other ways that we can make sure that people across the state of Nevada get access to contraceptives when, where, and how they need them, and looking forward to working on that.
So how can, not just this bill, but there's lots of ways bills can become laws. And at this time of session, there's lots of tricks that y'all have up your sleeve. And I often get these questions from our team and from our volunteers. Talk to me about how a bill might die in one chamber, but could come back to life hypothetically in another chamber, or as we go through the end of session, how zombie bills work. Because a lot of people at home sometimes miss that part of session. I always say the end game, as we call it, the end of session is my favorite time of session, because things that you think are dead might come back alive. And that's the importance of paying attention and being in the building.
Yeah, so I think that something important to keep in mind when it comes to reviving policies that maybe failed a prior deadline is that you got to put your ego aside, and people aren't going to get the credit that they originally wanted or deserved, because at the end of session, we start looking at a bigger picture of all of the bills that are still in the process, that are still alive. And basically, we're thinking about making amendments to them. And so there are different points in the process where you can add an amendment to a bill. And at those different points, we have different rules about how germane they have to be and who's able to make the amendment. So it might be that, for example, on a Senate bill, it's already passed out of my house, I can no longer amend it, but I might have a colleague in the assembly who's able to put an amendment on a Senate bill to do something that we had intended to do in a different bill that has since died. And that's when you really have to start thinking about pieces of policy separately, not just whole bills, but saying that, we like sections 2 and 3 of this bill, and we like sections 8 and 9 of this other bill. How can we get both of those into law, given that everybody hates section 1 of both bills?
The other thing people don't often understand is we're at the point of session now where it's past one house, it's in the other house. Tomorrow is the deadline to get it off the floor if it's not exempt. Then what happens? What if the other house puts an amendment on it?
Great question.
Yes, I figured you might be able to explain conference committees and all of that jazz.
Yes. So there are a couple steps in this process. And basically, if one house amends the bill, then, so if I have a bill that says, we will, I'm trying to think of something inane, but, I have a bill that says X, Y, and Z. In the assembly, they amend it to say X, Y, and Z plus 1. Then it comes back over to our side, to the Senate side, to decide whether we're going to accept that amendment to, add plus 1 or not. And that process itself is a little bit technical in terms of who gets to decide. It's technically the whole house, but that's where we rely really heavily on sponsors and chairs to be reading these things and to be telling us about whether or not they've worked on it. So generally, if the assembly has amended my bill, I'll tell my caucus, I'm fine with this amendment, and my caucus will follow me. And so if we accept the amendment, then the bill is done. It's good. It goes to the governor. If we don't accept the amendment, then the other side gets a chance to undo it, take it off. And if they do that, then it goes back to its original form and we continue on. Or if they don't take off their amendment and we're still not agreeing to their amendment, we go to a conference committee. And in a conference committee, that's where you have 3 assembly members, 3 senators, sit down in a room and hash out whether or not they're going to accept the amendment, reject the amendment, or amend it in a different way.
Oh, the beauty of legislating, policy making, the sausage making. This is when all the sausage happens. Okay, so sine die is upon us, goddess willing, unless there's a special or multiple special sessions. Listen, I'm planning for the worst. Today, the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker had a great press conference talking about, listen, we're not going to even consider passing some of these deals if you don't sign the education budget. Last night, I was in a committee room where Republicans voted against the education budget. Very, very disappointed. What are you thinking as a caucus member, as somebody who used to represent my district in Las Vegas? What are you thinking about when you think about your constituents as we go into the end game, and what are you hoping to see from the governor?
I always try to put my constituents first. I think we all do. And I think about the things that I, just could not possibly go back to them and say or fail to say, like failing to fund public education. That's just, I'm never going to fail to do that. And so it was very important to me that we passed those education budgets yesterday, because they are historic investments in public education in the state of Nevada, which I believe in very strongly. And we my caucus, the Senate Democrats have always been willing to work with the governor's office to talk about, finding places where we can agree and where we can compromise. And it's really frustrating when we're not being met halfway. And so I'm still hopeful that that can happen. Like you said, this is the end game, and this is the time when people really have to, the governor included, really have to look at those policies one by one, assess which ones are the most important, and see where we can find some common ground and move the state forward.
Constitutionally, you all are up here. You can do bills, you can work on all kinds of legislation, but constitutionally, what are you all mandated to do in the state of Nevada?
We are required to pass a balanced budget that funds K through 12 education first. So that's why it's one of the reasons that we pass the education budget first every session. And our constitutional mandate is to pass a balanced budget. And so those education budgets that we passed yesterday, combined with the other budgets that are coming down the pike, would balance the state's checkbook.
Okay. What do you want your constituents to know at home? How do people reach you? And how do people stay involved with this part of session? Because it's going to move quick now. And so what are your suggestions on people staying involved?
It does get harder as things start moving more quickly. And sometimes I think what you see online isn't always what you get, right? A bill might look like it hasn't been moving at all, when really behind the scenes, we've been negotiating it very heavily, and you're going to see a big amendment tomorrow. And so I think it's important for people to remain engaged, to continue to talk to your legislators. I love what social media can do for us. I follow Annette on Twitter. I follow BBP on Twitter, and that helps me stay up to date with what's going on, especially in the other house and in other committees. And I always encourage people to reach out to their elected officials. You can email us, you can call us, you can text us, and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to start doing these daily, so I'll probably have you back and your colleagues back. Before you go, can you just show everybody the earrings you have on and just remind everybody of the bee situation?
I do believe in saving the bees, and I love bees. I also don't think they're very dangerous.
Not compared to guns.
No, not more dangerous than guns.
That's from the 2019 session. Google it, everyone, if you want to know more. She went after a Republican for this. It was great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for always doing this with us. I appreciate you. All right. So, Assemblyman Nguyen, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you. I've got a couple questions for you in the chat, so we're going to get to those in a few seconds. If people have questions, put them in the chat. We want to get to as many questions as we can. All right, Assemblyman, you're up in your office, so I am going to be going back and forth with you there. Talk to me about some of the bills that you're working on right now and some of the bills you have left in the process, especially as a freshman legislator. It's probably a wild time for you to see it from this side, since you've always been on the activist side with us.
Well, thank you for having me on. Again, I apologize for missing last week. As Annette stated, I was in the committee, really want to be there, but we had a long revenue hearing, and we had to make sure that we ask all the questions on behalf of our constituent. So it's really great for me to be back here. And you are correct. As the first term legislator, I am learning the process. It is really cool to be up here and be able to really represent my district and my constituent, and also on behalf of the state of Nevada, to really move our state forward. And there's a lot happening. And as you heard from Senator Scheibel, one of the most effective legislator in this building this session, she has so many bills that, went through really great hearings. And I think we are very, very excited to come down to the final days and making sure that when we finish up here, that our state's ready to operate efficiently and a lot more in the next 2 years. So we want to be able to give that, good send off. And of course, we wait until last minute on a few things, but of course, that's just part of the process. So in terms of the legislation that I'm very happy to sponsor this session during my first term, one of them, very proud of is AB 274, financial literacy for our K-12 students, which is very critical. That's part of my constituent outreach when I campaigned last year. in my district that a lot of parents are concerned that their students, some are about to graduate high schools, some are about to be an adult, right, 18 years of age, and not having the basic skills of knowing how to balance a budget, right? Here in the state level, we're trying to balance the budget for the state. Well, talking about an individual young adults who are coming out to the real world and need to know how to do housing budget, transportation budget, food budget, healthcare budgets, so many things that will require them to be having the basic foundation. Otherwise, they're going to be subjected to these predatory lending practices or credit card debts that could ruin their start as an adult and be able to put them in a financial cul-de-sac starting out. And that's not good, because then it will affect their ability to purchase a home later, getting low interest loan products, or even be able to survive and not living paycheck to paycheck. So those are critical steps that we need to make sure that our young adults, especially 9th grade to 12th grade, as they're preparing to, either go to college or go to vocational or, just go out and work, they have the basic knowledge how to really maintain the minimum. And then that bill was passed bipartisan, unanimous in both houses, because our legislator, our Nevadans, know that our youth are our next, generation, our future, right? And what better way is to equip them with the right knowledge at the starting time when they're 18, so that they can all be successful, because it will then affect the future generation after that, and so on and so on. So I'm very happy that it passed unanimous out of the Assembly and the Senate. So it's on its way to the governor for his signature.
You think he's going to sign it?
I hope so. It's unanimous, so I think it's a no-brainer there. There is another bill that AB 251 that is truly speak to our growing language access needs in our state. We are one of the most diverse state in the country, and the 71% of our diverse population speak language other than English at home. And it's critical for us when it comes to prescription drugs, where folks can be able to have that direction. And AB 251 is meant to add a direction of, the frequency of how, when, and where you take the pills to be in another language. And my bill is to put the requirement on the top 10 languages based on the census data. And that changes, often. And so we're going to base on the latest census data. Top 10 languages include Spanish, Mandarin, Korean, Vietnamese, Arabic, Russian. Those languages are critical, because when there is a lots of medication for one person to manage, and they have a caregiver, and they may have folks that may not be able to communicate, this bill's going to help them to be able to understand the basic of when to take the pills, how many, and then, they have the ability to self-manage, as well as when they go to their provider, it's available in their language on top of English. So this is an added step to be able to reduce the medication error and save a lot of money, and also save a lot of error in terms of staying healthy and be able to manage everything. It's also a bipartisan bill. Did not get the unanimous that I hoped for, but I believe that, we got bipartisan support in the Assembly and in the Senate, and we want to make sure that the governor understand that this is critical. This is actually helping a large percentage of our Nevadans, and it's very important that we get this into law and be able to help Nevadans.
Yeah, it's literally a matter of life or death. So let's hope he signs it. Okay, so this is the second time you've been on the show, I believe. You came on as kind of our freshman legislator intro show at the beginning of session. Now we're almost at the end. We're about to go through second House passage tomorrow. Tomorrow's another really big deadline. So for those watching at home, follow along with us on Facebook and Twitter. And then hypothetically, for regular session, we have about 8-9 working days, because they work through the weekend. So fun fact, everybody at home, We will be working through the weekend this weekend, so you're going to want to join us because all of the money committees will be in this weekend and probably some other committees for the bills that are exempt. But what's that been like? Because, you were brand new when we talked to you the first time. What has this journey been like, and what have you learned through this process?
Thank you for the question. It truly reminds us of how fast this process can be. And again, most Nevada know that the legislature don't meet every year. We only meet for 120 days every odd number of years. And we're trying to solve so many things in a very small amount of time. So the creation of a balanced budget, and as well as ensuring that all these policies, I mean, after COVID, we have so much things that we got to discuss in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, in terms of how we thrive as a state. And so this process is definitely needing a lot more input. And what I mean by that is that we need all Nevadans, not just, the folks in BBP and the folks that are watching now to be engaged, but invite your friends, invite your neighbors, invite your family. Let's get more voices at the table so that it's not just a one-sided conversation, so that we are able to, as a state and as a community, come together and truly lift up all voices. And those are the things that is critical for us to be successful, because, as a first-time legislator, I was able to bring up a lot of topics that may have not been brought up before because I come from a new perspective. And it's so important that everybody testify, call their legislator, send in emails, send in, support or opposition letters. We read all of them. We truly do. And we want to make sure that we hear and see all perspective. Otherwise, you're going to leave this legislative process just for a very small number of people. And that's not how we want to govern. We want to make sure that Nevadans truly participate. And that's something that I learned is so powerful now that I'm on this side, because, I used to be on where Annette is in terms of going to all the offices and lobbying all the legislator when I was not elected yet. And now being on this other side, I learned that is so important, that I want to be able to hear from all of my constituents and not just a few.
For those of you at home, it's going to probably get loud behind us here in a few minutes because the Senate bells, there's bells in this building that go off when it's time, and then there's words that go off when it's time for the assembly to go in. So the Senate is about to go back in. So you're probably going to see it start to get a little busy behind me. So just ignore that, ignore the noise. Our team will be monitoring the Senate floor session, but we're going to keep going. Assemblyman, we are getting a lot of questions from people at home, so we'll get to those in just a second. But I do have one other important question for you, because we're coming to the end of May, and May is also AANHPI Heritage Month. And we'd love to, recognize you, first of all, because, it's historic having you in this body, but also you do such great work for your community. What's it been like to be a part of that caucus and serve your community, especially for the work you do outside of the legislature?
Well, thank you for that. Happy, and that long acronym stands for Happy Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Every May, the entire month of May, we get to celebrate such a diverse culture that we have all over the country in terms of the diversity, the cultural, the languages. It just, and all of that is right here in Nevada, as well as in my district. District 8 is one of the most diverse districts in the state. And as an immigrant, I'm one of 3 immigrants that is here in the building. It's so surreal. And thank you, Annette, for asking this question, because Monday, just a few days ago, I was able to invite my parents to come up to Carson City for the first time. They've never been in any state capital in their lives, and they came up. And my father, was one of the refugees that left Vietnam in the middle of the night when I was 4. I didn't even know and meet him until I was 11 when I immigrated here to the States. And his experience, he sacrificed his life to come here so that we can have a better future. And then his story is one of many thousands of immigrant stories that are similar like this right here in Nevada, not anywhere far, to really find a way to have a better future. And coming to the state capitol was a surreal experience for them, because they never thought that they would even thrive, much less have their son being the first Asian immigrant to be elected to Nevada state. That experience never registered to them. So when I brought them up here and they sat on the floor and I introduced them, it was a surreal moment for them. And I think that is part of what makes Nevada so great, is that we welcome everyone to participate in this process. And something that I never thought I would be able to do is to be in an elected office, to be able to serve my community and serve the state. So as we rush through this process, I would expect that there's going to be a lot of unkind words, a lot of animosities, a lot of exchange of really unpleasantry. But I would remind everyone to be aware of their surrounding, because there are stories that Nevadans are experiencing, and there are a lot of struggles that people come through, not just with the COVID, but through their life experience to get where they are. And we need to come together and spread that kindness and work together to bring everybody up, rather than just one communities or two communities. So it is critical that all of us as Nevadan come together, because we have a lot more in common than we are different. And we need to make sure that we continue to work together, because that's when our state will thrive.
I'm glad somebody in this building wants to be nice. That's really good. I want to ask you about the education budget. Jameer, who is new to the show, welcome, Jameer. He's asking about the education budget, which y'all passed today. I know it was a historic budget. We've never passed that much in the state's history before. And he's asking how it's going to affect our huge state, and how does the education budget work, basically, like just the basics, because I think a lot of people don't understand how we actually even fund education in these states and how budgets get made and how that work happens. So just maybe a little bit on the bill that you passed today. And that's Senate Bill 503 for everybody. And then there's other budget bills as well.
Thank you for that. Education is the foundation. The immigrant community that I represent, as well as all Nevadan, education is first. Without education, we don't have anything. So obviously, with our mandate as legislator and outside of having balanced budget, our priority is education. Education have to fund first before anything else is being taken. And that's one of our largest line item in our entire budget. And we are in a historic time when there are historic revenue that will, set us for success for years to come. And we need to, again, prioritize education. I mean, some of us here in this building act like this is something new, and it's not. Education has always been our priority. Doesn't matter if it's 1800 or this is 2023. Education is a no-brainer. We have to be able to ensure that our children and our kids are all protected by ensuring that their education is our priority. And for that, for our economic development purposes, for us to attract new industry in Nevada, or grow the current industry that we have, education is the foundation. So with the investment that we're making, the historic investment that just passed today in the assembly, we are able to do a lot more. We not only investing our kids, but we're investing in the educators. And educators are hardworking folks that truly doing the unsung work. And they are day in, day out, shaping the minds of our kids. And yet they are, one of the lowest pay in the country, and they have so much that they have to accomplish. So we need to make sure that we take care of our educators and the folks who are, day in and day out for many, many years, creating our future generations and shape their minds. So those are the things that I want to remind folks out there, that we have had many months of really planning. I mean, our legislator has been hardworking for months. This doesn't just happen overnight. It took months of meetings, months of negotiation, and months of planning to ensure that we do this right. So there are opinions out there that this just dropped out of nowhere. Well, that is absolutely not true. We have been at this for months because we know how critical it is to invest in the number one priority for us. It's education. And, the Assembly Democrats and the Senate Democrats know that and have done that. And it's unfortunate that we did not get bipartisan support on something that should be number one priority for everyone and not partisan.
And just for context, for those at home, it was about $1.1 billion for the 23-24 fiscal year. And for fiscal year 2024-2025, it was $1.4 billion, which is historic. We've never invested that much in our education system. And for the state to be this size and to be not have the revenue sources that we need, this is a really important investment in our education system. And Assemblyman Wynn is right. We have never done this. And for the Republicans to say that this just dropped, like you said, is completely disingenuous. I've been involved, Maria's been involved in all of those finance and Ways and Means hearings, nights, weekends. And so it's just insane to me that they would vote against the public education budget. But here we are. Assemblyman, what do you want to leave us with as we head into sine die and hopefully not into a special session, which we're going to talk about in a minute?
Well, you probably going to hear at the same time I do. So right now we are just working towards what we are constitutionally mandate to do, is that first initial 120 days. Anything after that, it will be up to the governor or the leadership of both houses to figure out when we get there. But right now, the priority is to finish on June 5th. And we want to make sure that we put our energy to getting to that finish line. So I would leave you with this. Don't continue and do not stop on your engagement with your legislators, with the governor, with the folks who are truly there to ensure that we do our job. So continue to stay engaged with us, continue to stay engaged with organizations like BBP, because they are here. I literally see Annette every part of the building. I turn a corner and here she is. So I turn a corner and I see a member of the BBP team. So they are here. They're hardworking. Please make sure that you stay engaged, because we want to hear from everyone, and not just a select few. We want to hear from everyone. 10 days left. I don't know if I'm even saying that right. Can't even figure that out anymore. But we want to make sure that everyone stay engaged. So please continue. Call my office. Send me an email. Please stay engaged, because we want to hear from all Nevadans.
All right, Assemblyman, thank you. I appreciate you. For those who are watching this instead of the Golden Knights at home, just an update. It's 1-1 because McNabb screwed us in a power play. So I'm just updating you in case you're watching this instead of that. I will be watching that on Senate floor after this. Anyways, go Knights, go. And by the way, their stadium was funded privately. So definitely go Knights, go. All right. Thank you, Assemblyman. I'll see you around the corner when I pop out like a jump scare. All right, I want to bring in Paul. Paul, welcome to the show. Paul, introduce yourself. This is your first time on the show. Welcome.
It is my first time on the show. It's very strange to be
on the opposite
on
side.
The other side.
I know, that's why I did this.
My name is Paul Boger. I am a reporter, producer for Nevada Public Radio.
Awesome. All right, I want to talk about the stadium. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we're going to start with something else. You went to the press conference today that Senate and Assembly leadership had about, listen, Governor, if you veto these budgets, the education budget, which we were just talking about with the senator and assemblyman, we are drawing the line in the sand and you will not get a stadium and you will not get a Sony deal, which to me, I'm like, please, for the love of God, don't sign those budgets because I don't want any of this nonsense. What was your takeaway from that?
We heard the governor's chief of staff, Ben Kiekefer, talking to Steve Sebelius from the RJ a couple weeks ago, pretty much just draw the line in the sand, saying if he doesn't get the $500 million for over the next biennium for opportunity scholarships, which is
vouchers,
voucher program, he was going to veto the budget. He's been very clear about that. That is his number one priority because, that's what the governor ran on. He was all about school choice in the election. And if he can fulfill that, he has done what other Republicans, more popular Republicans, maybe who are now the president of UNR, was not able to do. So that would be a feather in his cap, at least with the GOP voters. And he'll need that, especially going into 2026. He didn't do that well in the GOP primary. He's got to make headway with those Republican voters. And there is a lot of appetite for school choice in this state. And I think a lot of that comes from not in the belief that school choice is really any better as a policy educationally. Instead, it is more frustration with CCSD and the large school districts in the state and the lack of funding. So I think that's where a lot of those frustrations come from. And a lot of parents are just sick of it. They're willing to do anything to get their kids into a school district or school that they deem is better, whether that's private parochial school or whether that's a charter school or whatever. So I think that's where a lot of that push from the governor is. Now, the Democrats were very clear. They are not wanting to have this budget battle. They have spent months crafting a budget in open hearings 2-3 times a day. Talking about this stuff with agency heads, with the governor's office, finance office, with GoEd. These conversations have been going on. So this budget should not be a surprise to anyone involved. In that same vein, Democrats absolutely are going to put as many pressure points on the governor as they possibly can. One of them is the A's deal. The other one's the film studios. But you're also going to see that with maybe some of his other legislation, while we haven't seen a lot of movement on restorative justice, that was a big push by the governor, and we have seen what looks like a pretty similar bill moving through the legislature. So I think there is still room for compromise, but can we get it done in what is 11 days? I don't know. And let's be honest, the Democrats passed the budget when they did to force the veto within the time frame of the session, right? They've got to now, the governor has to sign this or veto this budget within 5 days or it becomes law. So they're forcing his hand, and by forcing his hand, that makes it much more likely we're going to go into a special session.
So I've always thought, me and Maria, I feel like predicted this back in December every step of the way because I felt like the writing was on the wall with Lombardo. He has never been tested. He doesn't know the legislative process. He was a sheriff who just, threw a temper tantrum, got whatever he wanted. And now he has to deal with a legislature that is not controlled by the same party as him. And he's making demands and doesn't understand maybe the art of compromise as somebody like Brian Sandoval did or a Kenny Gwynn did. This is feeling more and more like a Jim Gibbons situation in 2007. So for me, what do you think needs to happen here to get us out on time? And do you think that is even possible now with these lines being drawn in the sand?
I'm going to be careful because I'm a journalist. Yep. I'm not going to, pontificate as to why the governor's doing things or
that's my job.
That's your job. All I can do is take what I know.
Yep.
And make the best, hypothesis sometimes.
Yep.
And I'm a public radio reporter, so it's not like I always get the top information first, but looking at what's going on, it's funny you mentioned the bell earlier for the Senate.
Yep.
The bell is what reminds me almost every day that this place is much more like high school than it is a governing body. And I wish that weren't true for Nevada politics at large, but it is. It's much more personality driven. It's much more, it's much more depressing than it really should be sometimes. Seeing how the laws are made and what actually makes it through the process is typically based more on who likes who and what favors can be done for whoever than based on policy.
Yep.
But unfortunately, that's politics everywhere.
Yep.
So looking at the path forward, it's going to take compromise. It's going to take a compromise by the administration and the leadership on school vouchers. Unfortunately, Democrats have made it very clear that there is no room for negotiations.
Good.
The governor has made
Thank
it clear there is no room for negotiations. So we're at the stalemate, and it's going to be a matter of who blinks first. We could be staring down the barrel of maybe I shouldn't use that phrase of a government shutdown, at least educationally, on July 1st. Right? If they pass all other aspects of the budget and still don't have an educational bill or education funding, which actually they can't because they have to pass it first. Anyway, saying all that, we could be having discussions on school funding in late June. And then it turns into a contest of who blinks first, who is going to have the better messaging. And as a journalist looking in, I don't think it's the Democrats right now, because again, I think there is just so much frustration with CCSD as an entity that parents they just want anything.
Yeah. No, and it's frustrating because we are so opposed to vouchers and we are so opposed to essentially defunding or moving money out of the public education system. But also we still need to fire JARA and all of the things that we've been asking for 2 years.
And let's talk about just for a second what the opportunity scholarships are and just how dramatic an expansion these are. I got here in 2017. The opportunity scholarships were pretty much still fairly new as a policy, and there was roughly about $10 million being sent to the program over the biennium. It's about $5 million each year, and the program has done fairly well, I guess, in getting some money to parents, but it's never been fully drawn upon.
Nope. This last year, it wasn't not even 50% of it was used.
Right. And that was during the year that it was dramatically expanded, because there was about 25 million over the course of the 2 years, the biennium for funding for opportunity scholarships. So all that being said, taking that program and dramatically expanding it from, families who make 300% of the poverty level, that's about $80,000 for a family of four, and then raising that to 500% of the federal poverty level. And you're talking about that's $150,000 for a family of four. That's not middle class anymore. So the constant argument that this is an expansion for school choice for the middle class,
it's garbage. I'll say it. It's garbage. We shouldn't be doing it. Vouchers are bad. Betsy DeVos. That's all I'll say. Okay, I want to go to something else. We are here today and we are joined by my friend Dennis from Oakland. In a few minutes, he will be on to talk about my very least favorite thing in the world. I'm calling the end of my career at BBP the Eras tour of bad ideas, like Taylor Swift's tour, but worse. But I love Taylor Swift. The thing I hate most is stadiums. Of all the things I've worked on in 10 years, publicly financed stadiums are the worst possible thing we could do. And then we added on $4 billion of as you call it, a real estate deal on top of that. Let's talk about that. I want to talk about Sony first, because I don't think anybody has really talked about Sony, and we need to explain what Sony does. So can you explain that to our viewers, and then we're going to get into the stadium.
So let's take Sony out of it for a minute, right? Let's actually take them out of the equation. So we're talking about SB 496, which is the stadium deal, or excuse me, not the stadium deal. This is the movie industry transferable tax credits deal. So essentially, what it is it's meant to incentivize Hollywood moving to Las Vegas. And whatever you feel about that, there has just been this ongoing conversation since I've been here, since I guess since the day Nevada was created. Since creation. Since God and Moses upon on high came down and said Nevada needs to diversify its economy.
1864. Right. Mining wrote the Constitution, yada, yada, yada.
But then, we've got to diversify our economy. We got to diversify. and this is meant to diversify by creating another tourism-based business, but whatever. What this does actually, it creates incentives to build two film studios in Southern Nevada, one in Summerlin, one in Las Vegas. And the way it works is that the developers, who are the Berkshire Group and who are UNLV as one, and then Howard Hughes Corporation and Sony as the other, proprietors of these sites would get up to $175 million a year in tax credits that they could then sell to content producers who choose to make movies or whatever content at those sites. The other 15 million, the actual film tax credits, those are based for whatever movies are not filmed at those sites. So if you decide to make a movie in Reno, if you decide to make it in Ely, Elko, whatever, a Western, something like that, you'd only be eligible for the 15 million. Whereas if you make whatever at one of these two sites, then you get as many transferable tax credits as you can possibly buy. But the key is, as my understanding of the bill reads, the money goes to those two developers first, and then they have the discretion to sell the tax credits as they can to get whatever they can out of them.
So it's like a pyramid scheme for tax credits.
Isn't that just taxes? Anyway. But that's how that works. So calling this a film tax credit is a little bit disingenuous because it's a developer deal.
Yeah.
And that's the way it keeps coming across. Every time I hear more about this bill, it sounds more like a developer bill. Now, whether that incentivizes development of the film industry, great. But then you have a whole other problem of you've now lured businesses here who bring their own people, who then add more people to the valley. It's a water drain. It's a resource drain. You have more kids in the public education system. You have more kids taxing, or more families taxing the healthcare system. And yet, as a state, we've done little to correct those issues.
Right.
So
and maybe if we just corrected those issues, businesses would just naturally want to come here.
Well, I mean, that's the argument. But I would tell you, as a Reno resident, we have our own version of this called Tesla that they passed in 2014, who got billions of dollars in tax credits and built a factory. And yes, it has been a boon to the Northern Nevada economy and has helped diversify and lead us away from our reliance on gaming. But I will tell you that it has also come at higher housing prices, worse roads, more kids in school with teachers leaving. It's those issues.
Yeah.
And how we address them as a state continues to be kicked down the road, it seems like.
Let's talk about the money, though, for a minute, because $4 billion plus is unprecedented in a state like Nevada, who has the budget size that we have. We're going to talk about the Oakland A's in a minute. From California's perspective, I mean, that's not that much of their budget, but in a state like Nevada, that's so small. That's a huge amount of money for us. We are a very tiny state in comparison. This is kind of a wild thing to be considering in an economy like ours, in my opinion.
It's interesting because I came here from Mississippi, a state roughly the size of Nevada, with many of the same issues for completely different reasons, but many of the same issues. It's a rural state, very poor healthcare, poor educational standards, and yet they have an annual budget almost twice the size of Nevada's. So because they have an income tax, and then that's not an argument for taxation. It's interesting to see how they address problems versus Nevada, in a state where there is not the pool of money you see in other states. This actually, I'm glad you mentioned the price tag, because one of the interesting things about the movie film tax credit deal is that on top of the 190 million that is going to go to those developers, and I'll be honest, to get that money, those developers do have to build sites and build recording studios and filming studios and invest quite a bit of money, up to $1 billion, $2 billion of their own money to get those tax incentives before they're even eligible. Meaning that a lot of this money won't actually be given to the studios until 2030 at the earliest. But here's the kicker, and this is the part I love. Then the money's tied to CPI. So then it's tied to inflation. So 4 billion, 4.9
Tell them what you mean
billion.
by CPI, because not everybody might know.
Oh yeah, so it's tied to the consumer price index. So if the price of goods and services go up, the amount of money that these two sites get will go up as well. So we're saying that 4.9 billion is the bottom of the price tag. It's the lower end of the actual price tag for these sites. So is this worth $5 billion for a state where $5 billion is almost all of what we're going to spend on K-12 education next year?
Yeah, it's a good question. All right, before I let you go, want to talk stadium now. Governor said today he's going to veto the budgets. Majority Leader and Speaker said, if you veto those budgets, we will not basically maybe pass the stadium deal and the Sony deal. We have not seen anything in writing for the stadium still to this very day. So I don't know what deals they're talking about because I haven't seen one in either of you.
Right.
Talk to us about what this hypothetical stadium situation could be. Because it keeps changing, and it's changed multiple times.
I was telling you before this, I'm feeling more and more like Charlie Brown and the football every single day. Like the legislative lawmakers, just Lucy, like we're gonna drop the ball tomorrow. We're gonna drop the bill tomorrow.
I keep telling my friends in Oakland, like it's coming.
Don't worry.
And don't worry,
it's
gonna be fine. It's the Nevada way. Don't worry.
We'll get it Saturday. We'll get it Monday.
Whenever.
There's plenty of time.
Hypothetically, we'll get it in like a fax. Who knows?
We don't sound jaded at all. Good Lord. Anyway, so it's been a long 120 days.
It's only going to get longer.
But the thing about the stadium is, no, I have not seen it. I cannot tell you what is in it because the language is in a secret vault because top secret is code, right? So we're right now, as we understand it, based on the reporting from the Nevada Independent who broke the story, and from the folks we've all talked to, because we all know the sources are. It looks like it's going to be significantly less than the $500 million that they originally asked for. Remember, it was that $500 million for the original site, which I can't remember where it was anymore.
Yeah, well, the original site was on Sahara.
Sahara, that's right.
And then they went to the Wild West site, and now they're on Tropicana. All of them are bad. Right.
So now you got this Tropicana site, and what they're asking for is about $190 million from the state, and again, transferable sales tax credits. But here's a little different kicker. Half of that, based on what this deal is, can apparently just be transferred for cash from the state. So at any point, they can just say, hey, that $90 million in tax credits you gave us, well, we just want cash instead. Boy, I wish that's how banks work. But that's the deal from the state. And then there's this contingency from the county where the county will issue $120 million in bonds to help pay for the stadium, leaving Clark County taxpayers on the hook. So it looks like it's going to be about $380 million in public money for stadiums.
But from what I've heard, this is all a guesstimation because the A's can't actually produce a real solid number from everything I've been told.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this because it's the only thing that I know. They are proposing to build a stadium on 9 acres of land. A baseball field is 4.5 acres. I mean, I don't know a lot.
This is Clark County, and math is not down there is Clark County, and math is not our strong suit.
I hear about your schools.
It's bad.
But it's just the logistics of all of it. It just doesn't add up.
Of Tropicana in Las Vegas Boulevard.
And I say this as a Diamondbacks fan, the worst team. Everybody keeps talking about A's being the worst team in baseball.
And you're like,
Diamondbacks are the worst team in expansion league era history, and I will die for that team if I have to. But they also got a big bunch of money in public funds for their stadium in 1998.
Well, yeah, this is how they do these things, apparently.
But here we are 25 years later, and now they're threatening to leave, and they're trying to get out of their contracts. Yep. And if this is a vicious cycle. The Braves started this in the 80s with
the Raiders have done this. Remember 2016, friends?
Right. This has just become the standard of how teams get stadiums, and it requires it requires somebody to say no.
Yeah.
And at this point, I don't know who's saying no in this building or over in that building.
Yeah. All right. Prediction time. What do you, because we've got a lot of questions in here in the chat. Do you think, I love this one, it's from Sharon. Do you think Lombardo will seek advice, we do not speak his name, from the dude who is now at UNR, aka former Governor Sandoval? I'd take Sandoval over Lombardo at this point. I'm just saying that. That's not Paul, that's me. Go ahead.
You know, I'm glad you brought up Sandoval because I think Gibbons gets attributed to having his veto fest. But lest we forget, in 2017, Sandoval had his own little party with a veto pen. So it's not like Democrats should have not expected this.
Right.
This is what we see when we have divided government in Nevada. So do I think he's going to go to Sandoval for advice? I think at this point he doesn't have to. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I think, is he losing this argument? I mean, is he losing this standoff? I just don't see it yet. And I think we have to have, I think from the press conference today was the strongest rhetoric I've seen from this legislature this session.
Yep.
And if they're going to want to win this standoff with the governor, they're going to have to take a stronger message other than we're not going to give you your toys.
Okay. All right. How many there's another question in the chat. How many specials do you think we have and how long am I trapped in Carson City?
I think there's one special session that deals entirely with education funding and the argument over opportunity scholarships. And if there is some sort of agreement, we all go home.
Second question. Do you think a stadium deal and a Sony deal pass?
I think that there's a lot more bipartisan agreement on the Sony deal.
I think so.
Because at least there is an effort to create something, right?
And jobs, and invest in the economy.
And that's not bad politics. I mean, it's a lot of money, but you're never going to get in trouble for saying I created more jobs, right? For the A's stadium, I think there's a lot less appetite. And I think that if lawmakers somehow just never had to look at that bill for 11 days, they would be the happiest people in the world.
Me too. All right. That's Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining us. We'll have you back before the end of session. All right. My dear friend from Oakland, Dennis, I want to bring you in. Introduce yourself to our guests here in Nevada and tell us how you got involved with this movement in Oakland to keep your team in Oakland, because we don't want your teams anymore. At least I don't. Dennis, come off mute. Don't forget.
Sorry. Okay, I think I should be good now.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Oh, how do I?
There we go.
Can you still hear me?
Both. Yep.
All right, excellent. Sorry about that.
Don't say sorry. You're good.
So yeah, my name is Dennis Biles. I just want to say hello to everyone in the Silver State, and also everywhere else you're tuning in from. It's an honor to be here. This is awesome. I never thought I'd be doing something like this. But yeah, to give a little background, I'm part of the fan supporters group. We call ourselves the Oakland 68s, because that's when the A's first moved to Oakland in 1968. This was really the brainchild of one of my good friends. His name is Jorge Leon. He's the president of our fan supporters group. He's been real instrumental in just, putting this whole thing together and getting people united behind it. So, that's a little bit of background on us. I've been going to A's games, my whole life. I turned 40 this year, which I'm still trying to work out in my mind. But I've been going to the A's game since about, I think 88 was my first one. So a long time. I've been a season ticket holder since 2007, and 2007 was also the year I first met a lot of people in the bleachers. So, it's been a long journey.
Dennis, I'm not laughing at you. Paul just showed me a screenshot that appeared online. Oh, Assemblywoman Miller, hello. I am live. No, you're fine. Any guests are welcome anytime. Anyways, Paul was showing me a screenshot online where I'm grimacing at Paul, so that's the best screenshot of the night. So, Dennis, I want to talk about the owner of the Oakland A's because I don't think a lot of Nevadans quite understand what a special human being this Fisher character is. I have been doing quite a bit of research on this man, and he is yet another billionaire weirdo that I just don't think needs to be in Nevada. Y'all can keep him in California. Talk to me about the problem with Fisher and some of the things that he's done to the team historically, including the other team he owns in California and what he's done there. Because I think this really paints a picture of like why this deal is so problematic.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to John Fisher, I mean, obviously he's a guy that's looking to make money. And the way he does that is by cutting corners. He was part of the group that bought the team with Lou Wolf in 2005. And then the next season after that, they started implementing all sorts of things. Like 2006 is when they first closed the third deck, which was a controversial decision. They eventually took the tarps off about a decade later. But just, that in itself just kind of showed that they weren't really focused on getting more people in the park. It was just more so about like, oh, we're trying to artificially suppress attendance because, at the time in 2006, they announced plans to try to get to Fremont, which is just north of San Jose in the South Bay. So when that move was announced, it started, tarping off the top deck, scaling back on marketing, things like that. Even though he was at the time when he bought the team part of the third richest ownership group, in Major League Baseball, there was no real investment in the team. There was no real investment in the fan experience. I mean, and you just see that all around. Like I said, the marketing has been scaled down. They don't do as much outreach as they used to. They don't do a lot of little things that they used to. Like I remember, 5 minutes at the conclusion of every game, I would get a post-game email that would say, "Hey, the A's game just wrapped up. Here's what the score was. All these things." There's been 50 games this year. I haven't gotten a single one of those emails. A lot of inconsistent communication, from the team itself. Like I said, I've been a season ticket holder since 2007. I couldn't tell you once who my actual season ticket holder rep was by their name. Just little things like that where it was, just not really investing and actually trying to make the team better and actually trying to draw more folks out. It was more so just he was content to just kind of coast along with that. I have this asset and I'm making money because I'm on revenue sharing. Why put more into it?
So he owns, I believe it's a soccer team, a women's soccer team, also in the Bay Area. There was a lot of conversation when that happened that he bought this team. They built this brand new state-of-the-art stadium. Now they're going to be better. He's going to invest in this team, and none of that has happened. Can you talk to us about this myth that if they get a new stadium, suddenly he's going to change his ways and actually invest in people?
Right, exactly. And you hear that in sports all the time. You hear it, this team, they don't have, they're not bringing enough revenue. In order to rectify that, they got to get a new stadium. They got to get a new stadium. Well, that doesn't always do it. I mean, obviously the team has to want to actually invest, in the team. So when Fisher bought the Earthquakes, they got that stadium built in San Jose. I believe they finished it, was it 2014 or 15? I think it was 2015. Ironically enough, I was actually at that stadium groundbreaking because I did my undergrad at San Jose State, go Spartans. And I was a sports editor at the time, and I had to cover the stadium groundbreaking. So I was there for that in 2012 and, heard all the, typical, with this new stadium, it's going to increase our revenue. We'll be, in the upper portion of the league of payroll, things among that nature. And that's just never come to fruition. It's been, 8 years now since, I believe it's called PayPal Park now. It's been 8 seasons now since it's been built. And if I have my numbers correct, I know they're in the bottom half of the league. I think there's only 4 or 5 teams that have a lower payroll than the Earthquakes. So even with this new stadium, even though they do draw a decent attendance, he still hasn't invested in the team. They got this stadium built, and it was just kind of like they just, rubbed their hands there and said, well, that's it, be happy with this. So we already have an example of this same guy, just doing this thing where he got the stadium built and that's that, and you all should just be happy with it.
Yeah, he seems like a kind of a risky dude to do business with, in my humble opinion. Now, as you heard earlier, we have 2 examples, very different examples of one stadium that we have, Allegiant Stadium for the Raiders, which is another losing team, being built with public money. And then we have the Golden Knights, who are potentially on the second run to the Stanley Cup tonight, who have their privately financed stadium, which would be directly catty corner to where this nightmare might be built. So talk to me about kind of how you see this in terms of your team, who you love, moving to Las Vegas, to a community who doesn't know them, probably doesn't appreciate them the way you do, and what that means for your community. Because not only will it be a loss of revenue for your community, but I actually think it's a loss of revenue for my community too, in terms of the way they want to do this publicly financed nonsense.
Right. Definitely. Well, everyone knows about, the Warriors and the Raiders leaving town. So obviously it would be, another blow to a community that's been through a lot lately. And not even just from a sports perspective. I mean, when I think about Oakland, I think about the last 2 decades, what's been going on. It's been a city that's gone through a lot of rapid changes. We're struggling with a lot of things right now. 2 things that are tied together, the housing crisis in the Bay Area and gentrification in Oakland. I mean, in 2000 in Oakland, the Black population of the city was at 35%. In 2020, in the U.S. Census, it dropped to 22%. So we're seeing the identity of Oakland, change. We're seeing the soul of the city change, just year by year. So people are dealing with that. And then, like I said, you have, the sports team leaving town. I mean, obviously when we talk about Oakland, California, there's always, a lot of people who have a negative perception of it. Sometimes, people talk about the image, struggles with crime, things like that. So people are always, dealing with those sorts of things. It's tough. I mean, like long before this age drama started, Oakland has been going through a lot, and it's still going through a lot. And, just the Bay Area as a whole, with the housing crisis, things are changing rapidly and usually not for the better. So to lose, another team, another point of civic pride, it would be, pretty devastating.
Absolutely. For me, I don't like this deal for many reasons. I think you can probably tell my disdain for this entire conversation, because Maria and Teresa and I literally went through this nonsense in 2016 with Allegiant. I think Allegiant is different because it had backing of tax dollars through the room tax deal, whereas this, as Paul said, is putting Clark County taxpayers on the hook for a lot of the bonds that'll be passed. How does Oakland or your groups, the folks that we've been working with in Oakland, because we have been partnering with you all, how do you all feel about this deal and Nevada trying to make this deal the team that you know and love?
Well, I mean, I get it from a political standpoint. Obviously, when politicians are able to bring a new team to town, they can, that's a feather in their cap. They can say, hey, we have this football team, this baseball team. We brought them to town, like we did that. That's something they can use as part of their platform. They can say, when they try to, get reelected, they can say, hey, I get things done, things like that. I brought you guys this wonderful public entity. So obviously there's always going to be, that perspective of it. But I don't hold any grudge against, the state of Nevada for trying to do it. The one thing on a personal level that really gets me is that, they're talking about issuing bonds for this, which, personally, politically, I'm always pretty opposed to issuing bonds unless they're just used for, capital improvement projects. I mean, obviously this isn't a capital improvement project. We're not building a school here. We're not paving a road. We're building a stadium for a billionaire, it's who, he doesn't need the money to build this. I mean, there's speculation that he is cash poor and he couldn't afford, the Howard Terminal project in Oakland. But ultimately, John Fisher, he has a lot more zeros in his bank account than I do. Like if he wanted, to get the stadium built on his own dime, whether it's here, whether it's in Oakland, whether it's in Vegas, whether it's on Mars, he could do it. He doesn't need, to get, municipal bonds issued. But obviously he knows the game, and obviously he's going to try because, it goes back like we were talking about, the last, few decades in American sports has been this pattern where sports owner says, I need a team or I need a stadium. If you don't give it to me, I'm going to, get out of here. So of course, at that point, a lot of state legislators will start bending over backwards to try to appease them. And it just isn't right.
No, it's not right. I do want to bring up the history of Fisher with this team, though, because you talked a little bit about the investments or non-investments in the team itself, right? With the players, with the management, all of that. But there's an important part of this story that I don't think it's talked about enough, is the game that Fisher has played with the city of Oakland to try and get a deal done there. And now he's kind of almost pitting Las Vegas against Oakland for the team and trying to, in my opinion, see what deal he can get and the best amount of money he can get so he, doesn't have to foot the bill. Talk to us about that nonsense that has gone on with the city of Oakland and how he hasn't, I feel he hasn't been a good negotiator on that, or an honest one at least.
Oh, yeah, of course not. I mean, it was 2 years ago around this time. It was 2 years ago in May where, Cabell first came and announced the whole, parallels pass BS. So it became apparent to a lot of people at that time because, over the last 3 or 4 years, the messaging prior to that was, literally the team slogan was rooted in Oakland. And, when they brought in Cabell to be a team president, they really sold us this idea of like, hey, we're actually committed to Oakland now. Things are different. We're not leaving. We're going to stay here. They even took shots at the Raiders saying, oh, yeah, the Raiders just went to Vegas, to get the big shiny thing. And we're actually rooted here. And then you see 3, 4 later, they start talking about, the parallel paths. Well, like you just mentioned, they were negotiating in bad faith the whole time because, even just last month when the whole news broke about, the city of Oakland cutting off negotiations with the A's, at first I was kind of mad about it. But once I learned more about the background, I thought the city was well within their right to do it because they realized you guys are just playing us. And, the mayor, I think she called it very well. She said, all right, well, if that's what you're going to do, then go ahead and do it. Go ahead and get it done in Vegas. And as you see now, they're just scrambling, just trying to get something done because really it seems like they weren't doing much work, over the past 2 years. Really, it was just kind of, just hemming and hawing about, we're out here making trips and we're looking at sites. Well, now we hear that the bill apparently is going to be site agnostic, from what I keep hearing. So there's no even like agreed upon site yet, even though it's been supposedly 2 years in this parallel process. So it just shows that they were just kind of, stringing Oakland along the whole time. And now that they realize, oh crap, we played our hand wrong here, it just seems like they're trying to scramble to save face. And it's just, it sucks.
Okay, so you're a lifelong fan. I know what it's like to be a fan of sports teams. Sometimes they break your heart. What do you hope happens here? And what is your wish as an Oakland fan that happens with this? And what message do you have for Nevada legislators about as they're potentially pondering whether or not to give another stadium scam deal to another billionaire? Like, what do you hope happens?
Well, ideally, I hope that, maybe the bill gets stalled and never gets introduced, and then we don't have to worry about it. That would be ideal. If the bill does get introduced, I would hope it gets voted down. If it gets voted down, I mean, there's no telling what could happen after that. I sort of get the feeling that maybe John Fisher might be a little bit egotistical, because it honestly seems like the better path would be in Oakland right now. But after the events of the last month, they might just say, we can't embarrass ourselves like this. We gotta try and work this thing out in Vegas. So ideally, if this bill stalls and maybe he kind of just runs out of options in Vegas and he kind of realizes, well, I'm not going to get a signed stadium deal by next January. And that's the only thing that even the A's are motivated by, is that they want to get a signed stadium deal by next January so they don't get kicked off of revenue sharing. So building a stadium isn't about really, we want to bring baseball to Nevada or Major League Baseball to Nevada, or, we want to see, we want to improve the future of the franchise. No, it's just about, we don't want the free money spigot from Major League Baseball being turned off. That's all this is about. I think honestly, that's one of the parts, the thing that really gets to me is that, this isn't about actually improving the franchise. It's just about, making sure the revenue checks keep coming in. So ideally, if the bill stalls, I hope that maybe he just said, you know what? I bought this team in 2005 for, I think it was about 160 million. Right now the A's, even in, the decrepit Coliseum, they're valued at about 1.2 billion, according to Forbes. And as we've seen in the past decade, when sports franchises get sold, they usually go for about 20% over their value. I mean, so he's looking at a nice payday, even though all he did was just, sit on the team, not really invest in it, rent it the same as the previous owners. Hell, actually ran it cheaper than the previous owners. So yeah, he's only going to make a massive profit. So I would hope that he just says, you know what, I'm done with this. I want to sell the team. He sells the team to someone who is committed to staying in Oakland. And honestly, the part about that would be, you know, good for Nevada as well, is that Las Vegas is on the short list for Major League Baseball expansion. I mean, if they don't get the A's, I mean, you know, ironically enough, I'm a gambling man. So I got to make this analogy because we're talking about, you know, Vegas. I would put a pretty big bet on Vegas having Major League Baseball within the next 5 to 10 years with a brand new, you know, expansion franchise. And that would be that.
And look how cool our expansion franchise is in hockey. They actually win things.
Yeah, they've had a lot of success. It's very impressive.
Yeah. I do have one other question for you, just because I'm a snarky asshole sometimes. I found it rich that Mark Davis had something to say about the Oakland A's and their owner moving to Las Vegas. What's your take on the beef between Fisher and Mark Davis and all that nonsense when Mark Davis was also given a free stadium?
Oh man, you know, I could go from so many angles on this because I was never a Raiders fan myself. I was born in 1983. And in 1983, the Raiders were long gone. They went to LA in 1980 or 81. So when I was born, the Raiders weren't even in town. You know, when it came to the NFL, the Niners were the only game in town. So like a lot of other, you know, youngsters that were born in that 80s, 90s, you know, era before the Raiders moved back in 95, we grew up as both A's Niners fans, you know. So when the Raiders moved back in the mid 90s, I mean, you want to support the local team, and I got a lot of friends who are always Raider fans, but when the Raiders moved back, this, you know, city of Oakland took out, you know, a massive amount of bonds to pay for the stadium improvements. Bonds that are still paying off. I think they're not going to be paid off until, is it 25 or 26? You know, prior to that, the Coliseum was always considered one of the better facilities in baseball. And then after that, it's, you know, we know the state of it now. So I always disliked the Raiders for that. So, you know, with this whole drama going on between Mark Davis and John Fisher, you know, I mean, like I said, I was never a Raiders fan, but I always kind of wanted to support them for my friend, or at least just kind of, you know, give them, you know, kind of the friendly thumbs up for my friends. But when all this started to unfold, you know, I just thought of Mark Davis. It's just like, you know, he was never committed to Oakland. You know, even before he took control of the team, he was copywriting Las Vegas Raiders, you know, trademarks and stuff. So to see this drama unfold, it's definitely interesting because you just have two rich men who are fighting over free money. You know, it's like, what are we doing here? You know, it's ridiculous.
And that's what I call the Nevada way. Two rich men fighting over money because we're the cheapest state in town. So, Dennis, as this moves forward, I hope you and all of your supporters and you know, activists that are working with you will stay in touch with Battleborn Progress. We are here fighting against the stadium scam with you. And, you know, is there anything that you want to tell the people of Nevada that you hope they know as we kind of go into this fight, if we have to, in the next 11 days or whenever the hell this comes up?
You know, this isn't specific to folks in Nevada. This is more just a larger point about, you know, the state of baseball itself. You know, back in 1989, Major League Baseball started a program called RBI, it stands for Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities, which, you know, basically they wanted to get more young kids of color back into the game because it had kind of, you know, fallen out of favor a bit. And you look back at the mid 70s, you know, back then, you know, 24% of Major League rosters in the mid 70s were made up of black players. Nowadays, that percentage has fallen to under 10%. So, you know, when you look at what happened with the Atlanta Braves and they moved out of downtown Atlanta to a place that's, 30% black population, to now Cumberland, which is 4.3% black population. You know, how do we tell people of color, like, hey, baseball is for you. We want you to access the game. We want you to play the game, when we're taking these access points away from them. You know, a few years back in the bleachers, you know, among our crew, this is, oh man, time flies. This is a decade ago. There was a young kid whose name escapes me now. He was a junior high kid at the time. Pretty good athlete. His first love was baseball. But by the time he got to high school, McClymonds High School, commonly known as MAC here in Oakland, he couldn't play baseball because they were unable to field a team. And because he was a good athlete, you know, he gravitated to football. And he eventually got, recruited to play at Oregon, University of Oregon, which is, top tier football program. But, and, obviously, that's awesome. But it's just sad because, I think about his situation. I think of how many other young Black boys and girls that would have played baseball, that was their first choice, that couldn't because they grew up in a place where it wasn't easily accessible. And I look at Major League Baseball when they're taking teams out of, Black cultural centers, and you try to say you want to grow the game in the inner cities, but you're taking the game away from the inner cities. You're taking it, away from people who want to access this game, but they can't. And, that's actually one of the angles about this whole stadium drama, not just even the Oakland A's, but also, like I mentioned, the Atlanta Braves. That's one of the angles that I think has really been glossed over. And that's something I really wanted to point out because, I think about that a lot because I'm a sports guy. I'm a baseball guy. I want to see the sport flourish. And I know, we could have more people of color, from all over be a part of this game and contribute to it and make it even better than what it already is.
Yeah, and if you look at Major League Baseball, I mean, across the board, attendance is down, people viewing it is down for so many different reasons. I grew up watching it with my dad, and we were Seattle Mariners fans because we didn't have a team, and I grew up in Las Vegas. But where they're proposing to put this site is smack dab on the middle of the strip where no people go who actually live in Vegas unless we have to. And on top of it, if you look at Allegiant Stadium, specifically Raiders games, we were just voted the most expensive ticket in the National Football League. That it makes it completely inaccessible for people of color, for anybody in Las Vegas. I ain't paying to go see the Raiders for that much. I'm not paying for anything. I paid to go to Denver to watch the Broncos beat the Raiders a few years ago, and that was about the gist of it. But for me, it's the complete antithesis of what we should be doing. And I think you're 100% right. Like by putting it on the Las Vegas Strip, that is not making it more accessible. It's making it less accessible for people.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's ironic because, I've only been to Las Vegas once as an adult. I actually came out there in 2020, just right before everything went to hell. Because the A's were out there. Major League Baseball does this promotion every year called Big League Weekend. And they were out there, and it was the first time I went to Las Vegas as an adult. Ironically enough, I stayed at the Tropicana, and I had a blast. And it's actually kind of funny, like, I don't know, maybe I just don't know enough about, like, hotels and stuff. But when I stayed there, I thought it was great. I had a great time at the Tropicana. I went specifically because of the glass ceiling. That was awesome to see. And not only that, but when I checked in, there was a chocolate chip cookie on the bed. And then 2 days later, another one showed up after they cleaned my room. So I think the Tropicana is awesome. I know a lot of locals have kind of said, "Oh, it's trashy," but I thought it was great. I thought it was nice and clean and fun, and
the Trop is old Vegas, and we have a history of blowing up old Vegas. So it's going to be interesting to see. Dennis, I hope you'll hang with us as we continue to do this. You're always welcome back on the show, and we'll start doing these daily. And if we ever see a bill, we'll make sure that we get it over to you. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate your opinions on this. And if you want to get in contact with your organization, how do people do that, and how do people get involved with the good work that y'all are doing in Oakland?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I would say the easiest way is to probably just follow us on Twitter at Oakland68s. That's our Twitter account. I have a hand in running it, and when it comes to 68s, I'm definitely not the only guy. Like I said, Jorge Leon, he's the president. His wife, Michelle, she does a lot of work. A few of us have access to the social media stuff, so it wouldn't just be me like doing the Twitter stuff, even though I do a lot of it. So follow us on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter as well. I think I'm an interesting guy, at Denny149. But yeah, just follow us on Twitter. Find our Instagram handle. I'm pretty sure it's just Oakland68s. And we like interacting with people all the time. We're sports maniacs, and we like to meet new people, and that's honestly been one of the most rewarding things about being in the 68s is just meeting folks and talking about our great game.
Well, it's been an honor to work with y'all on this very special time in Nevada's history. And so keep up the good work. We're going to keep up it. We'll keep bugging people in this building, and we'll keep you up to date as we hear more. And for those at home who asked the question about the hiring of lobbyists for the A's, The A's have basically hired every lobbying firm under the sun in this building. So it's like me and Christine, who's right beside me from Plan. It's like us against them. So we're going to need your help because it's like two of us against, it's the whole David versus Goliath situation, which it always is. And Christine and I thrive in that. But, we're going up against people like Sony, the Resort Association, people like that. So if you all want to help, if you want to pitch in, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow Plan as well. They do amazing work. But we're going to need your support over the next 11 days. Just a note, next week, we're going to be live at 5 on BBP. But Maria and I have talked about it. We're going to probably start going live every night just to give you bill updates because things are going to start moving fast and furious. So tune into our Facebook and Twitter. If you're not following us yet, make sure you do. Send it to your friends and family because there's going to be a lot going on in the next 11 days or whatever it is at this point. We will be working nights and weekends now. So you follow us on Twitter, especially because we're going to be giving you bill updates. And as soon as we see a bill on a stadium scam, we will let you know. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. Thanks for following along. Thanks to all of our guests tonight. And just an update on the game. The last I checked, it's 2-1. Go Knights, go. Where are we at?
5:40 left.
5:40 left. We're in the second period. Go Knights, go. All right, friends. We'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll be in the Stanley Cup by then. Have a great night, everyone. Go Knights, go. Bye.